I am absolutely shocked that Giannis did not suffer a worse injury on this knee hyperextension, but does that mean that now everything is good? Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and this is your #1 source for learning about the unique medical side of the world of sports. In last night's initial video, when I talked about this injury, I said how I would be absolutely shocked if Giannis did not have a significant injury here. Just to give a point of reference for how significant this looked, there's some research that's looked at cadaver limbs that they actually put into forced hyperextension to try to see at what degree of severity the ligaments got injured. And it was around 30 degrees that we saw PCL and ACL injury. If we look back at the angle here of hyperextension, to me, this is at least 30 degrees. So this looked really bad. But now what we've learned, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, is there is no structural damage to Giannis's left knee after his awkward landing last night. Ligaments are sound. Timetable to return is unclear. I think the wording in this is really important, and this doesn't mean that Giannis got off completely scot-free. We have to understand that ligament injuries are on a scale of severity, from a grade 1 with just sort of microscopic tearing and stretching, to a grade 2 partial tear, to a grade 3 full thickness complete tear or a rupture. So when we just get a statement that the ligaments are sound, that doesn't really say 100% that there's not at least a stretch or a minor injury to the ligaments. From this, we can definitely say that there's no complete rupture or complete tear of the ligaments, which, bottom line, great news, especially long-term for Giannis's health going forward. So when I say Giannis isn't completely out of the woods here yet, what do I mean? Let's look at another star who suffered a knee hyperextension. This was Joel Embiid back in March, and you can see here as he comes down, the severity of hyperextension that Joel suffered. If we put the two of these side by side, there's no doubt that Giannis had a greater severity of hyperextension compared to Embiid. That's not a guarantee that there's worse injury, but just looking objectively at the severity of the hyperextension, no doubt Giannis had a more severe degree. Embiid missed, I believe, 10 games after his injury because he still had some bone bruising and probably some capsule injury, even though the ligaments were not severely injured with his particular play. So that's what's still almost a certainty here based on the severity of hyperextension, that Giannis has some degree of bone bruising and some degree of capsule injury, plus or minus possible stretching of the ligaments, even though the reports are that the ligaments are not completely ruptured. There's virtually no way that all of the tissues in Giannis's knee are completely normal after this severe of a hyperextension. When we develop these bone bruises or bone contusions, the actual structural tissue of the bone has some damage to it that induces some bleeding and some bruising within the bone. That's going to be extremely painful, especially depending on the severity, similar to what Trae Young is dealing with in his foot. And while the bone is technically part of the structure of the knee, we really wouldn't consider bone bruising structural damage. So when we hear a report that there's no structural damage, that doesn't mean that there's no bone bruising or bone contusion. Similar to the capsule injury, that capsule that lines this knee joint is not something we would consider a structural injury, so to say. So again, doesn't exactly rule that out. You might wonder too, is Giannis just truly the Greek freak? And is there something about his anatomy that makes him hypermobile or his ligaments more stretchy? And that's also not the case because again, this is so far beyond what we would see as sort of those possible normal limits of some slight hyperextension. If you have this much natural hyperextension and mobility in your knee, you're never going to be an athlete at this level. You're going to have all kinds of other problems. And so this is not something that is just natural for Giannis's body composition. So in summary, this is fantastic news, especially in light of all the terrible news we've been getting with injuries recently. But this doesn't mean that there is no damage or no injury at all in his knee. All this means is that those primary main ligaments like the ACL, the PCL are not completely ruptured, but just purely looking at the biomechanics and the anatomy, there still is going to be other soft tissue, bony contusions in there that are going to dictate when Giannis can return. A similar injury with Joel Embiid saw him miss around 10 games with no ligament injuries, and so there is still a serious risk that Giannis might not be back for the rest of the playoffs. That's it for the video, everybody. I hope this was educational to sort of follow up on the news here after what we saw last night. I'm glad that I was wrong and he avoided serious, career-altering injury here, but I truly think this is just luck that this wasn't worse than we initially feared. Let me know, as always, any questions or comments down below, and until next time, we'll see you later.